Dude, it's so nice having this PC too because like all the like no drop frames, no nothing. Like it's just
having them separate.
it's
having
just
the
so
dual
clean.
PC.
CPU usage 1.9%. Frame 60. Frames missed due to rendering lag. 6 out of 93,700. That's so crazy.
That's crazy.
All right. Should I tweet it out? Hold on, let me.
Sure.
Oh man, Twitter's going crazy too.
I'm pulling up your chat so I can have it pulled up just in case.
Mystery. Mystery's already in here. You literally do nothing all day. Come on, Jake, bro.
What's up, Jake?
Drop frames due to network. 1%. Rip.
Jake's the hard carry. I gotta get him in. We gotta get him in Apex with us. He's the hard carry for sure.
I know he is, Jake. I know he is. Said you were more handsome than I am. My boy's podcasting now. What's up? Other Jake, little Jake. We got little Jake in here.
Little Jake. All right, Garrett, I'm ready whenever you are, unless you want to wait for people to hop in here.
Little Jake, my boy. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Do you want to talk about who we are?
Yeah, no, we can just jump right in. So first off, for those who are watching the VOD of this later down the road, me and Garrett are essentially the two main people with Game On Financial. Garrett's the founder of Game On Financial with his other business partner Melanie, who's not on the podcast, but you guys will get to meet her at some point. And basically, we just want to start this podcast out to bring you guys content around our brand and talk a little bit about who we are, what we do. And yeah, so I'll just kick it off a little bit and talk about who we are, and then Garrett can kind of take it from there. So I mean, who are we? Who is Game On Financial? What is Game On Financial? We're an accounting firm that is basically specifically niched down into content creation, gaming, streaming. Anybody that specifically makes their money on the internet is who we work with specifically. We're not your traditional accounting firm that does a bunch of tax returns all year long and works with a bunch of old clients that bring in their W-2 and we file stuff like that. We specifically work with people who either make all their money streaming or making YouTube videos through that, whether that be gaming, whether that be pretty much anything on the internet. And we service them at the same capacity as we would service any client that needs tax services or financial advisory services. And we just kind of fit that need there. We kind of kicked this thing off, I guess, Garrett, you can probably speak better to when it actually began. So yeah, I mean, take it from there on when you actually started, and because I joined, I guess it was
January
last January. Yeah, so It's been a year and a half now. But speak a little bit to like kind of how you got into it, specifically this niche and everything like that, and when that started for you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, accounting was, that was obviously our background and everything, but I never really found satisfaction in working for, other types of clients. And I just saw a lot of potential with, people in spaces that I was already in. So, you and I have even talked about like, we work out consistently. So gym content, stuff like that. But specifically for me, like content creators and, obviously gamers, that's pretty much kind of where we've fallen. We do have other content creators and, they stream from various mediums. They create different types of content and stuff like that. But gamers for us, I mean, it was stuff that we were already doing anyway. We were just constantly playing, whether, Fortnite, Among Us, back in COVID when all those games were popular. But even before then, I've been playing, video games all my life. I know you have as well. And we had the experience and the accounting tools necessary to like actually service a need. So I figured like, why not? Why not do it? Like let's just send it, because my partner and I at the time, I mean, this was back in September of 2020. Yeah. I get my days mixed up, but
going on 3 years this year.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's been that long. It also feels like it's been a really long time. I mean, I'm like, it's the combination of everything. But yeah, back in the, like when Melanie and I first bought the firm in Savannah, we were there for probably a few months, and I went to Melanie. I was like, you know what? Like, if we're going to do this thing, I'd rather just send it with the clients I want to serve anyway. Cause I already had a few that I was already working with basically. And I was like, I love this. Like this, I would rather talk to these people all day, even if it meant for less money.
That's some good feedback. What you just said, that's some good feedback too for people watching this. In our industry in accounting, and this is probably the same for, I would say, like legal, law and even other industries as well that have like specific client bases. When you're in the service industry, especially professional services, it's so much more enjoyable to work with clients that you actually can relate to and that you really enjoy. And to what Garrett just said, that's something that while we can do accounting or tax or any of these services that we do for content creators, while we can do that for other people, it's so much more enjoyable to do it for people that you actually can relate to, or you have a passion about what they do. And so I think that's kind of what you're speaking to, Garrett, is it's a lot more fun when you get to do it for people that you enjoy working with.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's no, I think it's when you own your own business, and you're doing what we do, you can't do it another way. Like, you might as well just work with the people you want to work with, because ultimately you're the one making all the decisions. And so if you don't do that, then it just, why would you choose to put yourself in a situation where you have to work with people you don't like? That makes no sense to me. Right. So Jake said no thanks, Stream Elements.
Jake in the chat.
Both Jakes trolling in the chat. But
well, and Garrett, to speak to a little bit, because from the perspective you're coming from there, speak to just your background a little bit before you started doing Game On Financial and started this company. Speak to before, so you can kind of talk about your perspective a little bit there with what you did before.
Yeah, so I was working as an accountant at a larger firm, a regional firm. We probably 150 employees, approximately 20 something partners. So it was a relatively big firm, not the biggest, but big enough where, you could come across as just a number on a spreadsheet effectively. And so it was very production based. Like, it was constantly grinding. You had to have numbers to show, or you were going to basically get replaced. I mean, I don't want to say it was
traditional accounting firm.
Yeah. And I don't want to say it was cutthroat. It wasn't cutthroat by any means, but it was like, if you didn't have, good production consistently, then you were going to, basically they were going to sit down and talk with you, and they may even suggest an alternative career. So it was, I'm going to say toxic in the sense that they didn't care who you were working on. As like, if you were good at something, you just did that. It didn't matter what you had interest in or anything like that. And so, like, if you just acquired a project out of nowhere that you did a good job on, it didn't matter if it was a doctor, a lawyer, a hospital, it could be anything. If you did a good job on it, you basically got to keep the project. And what that led to was you had projects throughout various industries. They would claim that they were going to try and specialize you, but they never did. And so I had a lot of banking clients, I had a lot of hospitals, and I had a lot of high net worth individuals. And those are three very different categories to work on, three different industries. So that was great exposure in the beginning, but then after that, it was like, I don't know, it was just toxic, because I was being pulled in so many different directions that had nothing to do with one another. And I did not like that at all. Like, it drove me crazy. Compared to now, when we're like niched down and we have a very, very defined focus, even if we get outside of that focus, it's usually not by far, right? So I mentioned earlier, we have gamers, but we also have content creators in various spaces. We have YouTubers who have nothing to do with gaming or anything like that. So that's about as far as we go out, right? Now, we also do service real estate professionals to some extent. Like, we have a lot of content creators who have investments in real estate. So we have to know about things like that, other investments, but still, we don't get too far out of that. And then again, bringing it back to my background previously, this is so much better, because where I came from originally, coming up in the industry, it was just, it was like the Wild West, dude. And it was, you had to have your hours, you had to track your billable time. And so we were working, if you work 80 hours a week, you had to, or not 80, like let's say 70, right? 70 was much more of a consistent thing. And you only billed 63 of those, right? They would ask you like, why did you only have 63 billable hours when you worked 70, right? They're asking questions like that. And it's like missing the forest for the trees. Like you worked 70 hours and they don't care. They care about the billable time, right? And so
it's very much more of a rigid environment and a very structured, even down to the sense of how you progress in that career path is very, 3 years in this position, then you get promoted, and then 3 more years in this position, and then 5 years here until you can just eventually get to where, okay, you've been here long enough to become a partner. And I think that's something that when you look at accounting firms like all across the nation and probably even internationally, that's just the structure. That's how they work, from smaller regional firms like where you were to the big four, they work the same way. And so it's a very more of a, like you said, cutthroat, rigid environment. And I think that is for some people, while what we're doing here with Game On is obviously completely different. And, I just want to speak a little bit to my background, because that's originally how we actually met is I actually ended up interning back in 2019 at the same firm that Garrett was
it 2019?
Yeah, it was 2019.
It was 19? Wow.
Yep. So
that seems like yesterday.
So,
that's crazy.
I know, right? So I got fresh out of college and got an internship in accounting, and I had got my bachelor's in accounting at Georgia Southern here in Georgia, which is where we actually are. We're located in Savannah, Georgia, and so that college is right up the road. And yeah, that's how I met Garrett. He was actually the first person who I kind of like had talked to at the firm. He did like a tour. Garrett, I don't know if you remember this, but you did like a tour. You walked me around, showed me around. This was just my interview.
Yeah.
And so I was like thinking, okay, this went well. I got to meet this guy. He seemed cool. He showed me around the place, and next thing you know, here we are, however many years later, doing the podcast. So,
I tricked you.
Yeah, I reckon so. But we did have a lot of similar experiences at that firm, and honestly, even though we've gone away from there and we've kind of gone in this different path, and with Game On Financial and just everything we're doing now, which is so much different, it did give us a super great background and kind of built that base for what we do know, and a lot of the knowledge that we gained. I think you would attest to the same thing, is like a lot of our base knowledge of across tax especially was gained there. And so it did give us a great perspective and learned a lot there. And so, yeah, I mean, I think from our background perspective, even though it was a lot different than what we do now, it was great. It was very informative. And I think we learned a lot there. I want to pivot a little bit, Garrett. Speak a little bit to what you do on a day-to-day at Game On Financial, what kind of the structure of the company is, and what we necessarily do in serving clients. Obviously, we can talk accounting firm, tax, or whatever, but for somebody watching this, maybe even a creator watching this who doesn't know who we are, what does your day-to-day look like, and what is, kind of like who is our main client base, that type of stuff?
Yeah, so main client base, and I don't want to just overshoot this like it's nothing. Our main client base we serve content creators. It is incredibly intentional. And the reason for that is if you start there, you can define your processes and build them around that specific client base. So, things as small as communicating in Discord, right? I think our clients really appreciate that because most of our content creators have Discord. They use it, religiously, just like we do within our office. So it goes so far beyond just how we service them, but how we also do things internally ourselves. Like we use Discord the same way our clients do. We're doing all the same things our clients do. And while, they're running effectively an entertainment business, we're doing the same thing in the background for our business. And that, there's one thing for somebody to say like, oh yeah, I know about Discord, but there's another to like actually live it. Like we are in there all the time. And that's for several applications across, all of the entire industry, all the things that they use. We play the games that they're playing. So we can relate back to when they say, or when we see they don't even have to tell us. When we see the financial data come across, we see Activision Blizzard or something like that, and we know exactly what they're paying for. We don't have to ask that question because we already know. So that's why we serve the clients we serve, is because we can relate to them so deeply that, it takes away a lot of the friction that you get with a traditional accountant who's, the most egregious example would be like somebody wearing a pocket protector and like the green visor. And the button down shirt and all that, because that
the
just
old man with the white hair, right? That's
old
what we
man,
always
white
hear.
hair. Yeah. That's always the case. And like, the first thing they ask is like, hey, wait, you play video games for a living, right? Even if that's not what the content creator does, like they just assume like, oh, you play video games for a living. And every time I talk to a client or a potential client, they're always like, yeah, that's exactly what my experience was beforehand.
Yep.
And so,
And I think that's just to piggyback on the back of that. I mean, yeah, what you're saying is so true in what we see, and I think that it mainly is because of bad experiences, right? I think one of the cool things that we've gotten to experience with the brand and just serving this client base is that, truthfully, how many streamers or people on YouTube are a lot older, right? This is a newer industry. This is a newer, YouTube people, the big popular people that have been on YouTube, they've been on what, 10, 12 years max. This is a younger industry, right? And so we're working with a lot of people that are, our age. I'm 27. Garrett's a couple years older than me. But we're relatively young in the accounting industry. Most accountants that you're going to talk to when you're talking about a new prospective client is you're going to be talking to a partner, and that partner probably did more of that traditional path that me and Garrett spoke about earlier of, they worked there 3 years, then they're 5 years, then they were a manager for 10, and then they made it, 15 or 20 years later, they got to be partner. And so generally you're talking to an older person, and though that age group of person is not familiar with YouTube and Twitch and live streaming and gaming like we are, right? We grew up doing this. And so to what you're saying is definitely, I think it brings a level of comfortability and just relatability to the clients when you get on a call to talk, and what games they play because we play them, and what apps they use like Discord, and generally speaking, their kind of their schedule and their all that different stuff, because it's kind of what we do as well.
Just even kind of just even going to their chats, like knowing like we can log on to Twitch or Kick or YouTube and leave comments. Like we're so familiar with the platforms because we're in them all the time. It's what we're already doing. And so to be completely honest, I mean, because the next question, part of the question you asked is what we do for these specific clients. And I want to hammer, like, the reason we operate with these folks is because of this. The reason I hammered that was because once you have that dialed in, what we do for them is, I mean, pretty straightforward. We can handle their tax returns. We can handle their bookkeeping if they need it. Obviously, there's some level of financial advice that they get in the conversations that we have. We don't advocate as being financial planners, but naturally tax is a big piece of that. So there's that aspect. I don't have my alerts set up, but appreciate the follow, XBLA. Blaster. So basically, what we do for them is pretty straightforward. I think the main thing we bring to them is peace of mind, right? When we get on that initial call with them, the reason we bring on clients compared to other CPA firms, and the reason we bring them on so quickly, right? Like this past tax season, it blew up, and more than I could have expected in a single tax season. I don't think they cared at all about the taxes once we got on the call. I think they appreciate that we can do it and all that, but I think just by being on the call and like knowing, like, okay, these guys can obviously handle the tax stuff, right? But if I have to get a hold of them during tax season, they're like a Discord away, right? They can text, they can email, like they're quickly, like we can be in touch with them. We can get problems solved, and we can do it fast. Like that was our whole thing, is like, let's get these books caught up. Let's get this tax return. Let's do all this fast, and let's get it quick, because that's what they want. They just want to know it's handled. Like outside of that, they don't care too much about, I'm going to say who's doing it. That doesn't matter to them. They just want to know that it's being handled. And when we bring that peace of mind that, like we're chill, you mentioned it, you're 27, I'm 29. Not that being young is the end all be all, but we're on these platforms. We can come by chat and say, hey, and stuff like that. They've probably seen us on Twitter. Being relatable. They're like, oh my God, I thought I came here for taxes and all that, but this is so much better than I thought, because now, it's not saying we're friends with all these people, and we're not trying to be. We know we have a job to do, but at the same time, we're friendly enough and we're approachable enough where they can just like, bro, you can just Discord me and ask me a question and I got you. You know what I mean? Right. And if I can't answer it right away, you can, or we'll be in touch within a day versus the response time of any other firm is like ridiculous, you know, during tax
I was
season.
just about to say
You may not hear from them.
something. Yeah, that's something that you're hammering hard right now, and I think that's it's so true, is because what we see all the time is just the communication aspect. You know, again, but going back to traditional accounting industry, generally speaking, you're talking about formal email back and forth, you know, hard to get people on the phone, especially during busy season, you know, tax season obviously being January to the deadline of April 15th is a huge busy time. Communication is just generally speaking is poor. And that's something that I think we've been able to really capitalize on in this industry is, you know, when we very first started working with creators, which, you know, we saw growth mainly just from referral base, which we can get into a little bit later on of how we've kind of grown. But that was one of the main things, is just being responsive. And you can be responsive when you're willing to hop in a Discord and just message somebody, or hop on a Discord call really fast and just talk something out. And that's a lot of the time what these people want. You know, again, we're dealing with a younger industry. These young people that don't know how any of this works. It's a fearful thing. You know, they don't really know. They're scared of taxes. They're scared of how all this works, the IRS, whatever it may be. And to be able to just give that peace of mind really kind of instantly has been huge. And just to piggyback a little bit too, Garrett, on kind of like day in, day out, what it looks like. We are pretty much fully remote. So we actually do work in office. We do have an office here in Savannah, Georgia, is where we're actually located, our headquarters, but we work fully remote. Garrett, you know, is in and out of the office. Occasionally he works in the office, but a lot of the times he's at home, or he is right now. But we, you know, being able to work remotely like this, I can hop on a Discord call from my house, from my phone, if I'm driving, from, you know, if we're traveling to events, we pretty much never.
How many times have we done that
ability?
How many times have we done that? Like, we've been, you know, leaving the gym, and like we both get the Discord at the same time, right? And we're leaving the gym, we're standing by like your truck or something, and you're literally like, oh, so-and-so just Discord us. I'm like, all right, bet. Like, you know, you got it. You can respond or whatever. And it's like, I think we take that for granted because, you know, again, just being in the scene and in the industry, like we just do it so fast. Like, we're just like, you know, how fast can we solve these problems? Because if in your mind, you know, because I'm this way. You had a situation, and you should talk about this at some point, but you know, you had a situation with some contractors working on your house, right? And you just couldn't get a response, bro. Like, I mean, it's across the board in every industry, but if you just respond, you're likely to get the job regardless of how good you do it.
Times. Exactly.
You know, they don't even know how good you are. They just like, this guy responds really quick, you know?
Yep. And I think that's something that we're trying to do with Game On, is we're trying to basically instill ourselves as, look, when you call, we're going to answer, right? We don't need 3 weeks to respond to an email. We don't need this. Like, this can be something that's handled quickly and easily. And I think so many people, to your point, whether it's contract work, whether it's other industries, legal, it could be anything. They're ready to write the check. They're ready to pay you for your services if you can just get back to them. It's so much with just communication and being fast, and that's something we've learned for sure with just the year and a half that I've been here, and I think the 2 or 3 years you've been doing it is such a crucial part. And I think that we've been definitely able to grow based on that alone, much less the actual value that we provide, you know, in other ways through the services we do. Yeah,
I'll take it a step further and say, like, taxes aren't fun. Nobody gets excited like, oh, I can't wait to do my taxes this year, this and that. I mean, yeah, if you're expecting a big refund, some people do, sure. But most people, like, it's one more thing you have to do. You do it once a year. So it's not like it's something you get good at. You just have to do it. It's not fun. It's not sexy. And if you can, in your client's mind, basically portray that you can get it done quick, you can be responsive if they have questions, and you can make it as seamless as a process as it can be, because it's just not always that way. And even going further, if it's not going to be seamless, let them know they're at least taken care of, right? If the IRS, you know, kicks back a return for whatever reason, at least let them know, like, hey, we got it handled. We can take care of it. You know, I think we provide that, and I think we're getting better at it constantly, which is the really exciting part, because again, this firm is, compared, relatively speaking, to most firms that are out there, we're new. We have the accounting experience, but the firm itself is relatively new. So figuring out all those things like HR in the background and all that stuff, as well as maintaining a steady workflow to keep these clients, you know, projects moving, you know, we have only gotten better. We've only gotten faster, more efficient, and it's really exciting because that leads to better sales in the future, right? More and more people are going to say, like, just reach out to Garrett. Like, if you have a tax problem, I don't even know what it is. I don't need to know what it is. Just reach out to Garrett. Reach out to Joseph. These guys will get you taken care of. That's what we want. That's ideally. Go ahead.
Yeah, and no, I was just going to say, speak to a little bit too. I just want to, to what you're talking about, chime in a little bit on, like, what does it look like from the start when you started, and I know when you started and you had one or two main clients to now, what has that growth kind of transitioned into as far as the services that we actually do, because I know whenever we started, whenever you kind of started doing this thing, a lot of it was focused around a tax return, and then now it's kind of taken shape a little bit, and the services we provide have kind of pivoted a little bit. Speak to that transition a little bit and kind of like what it more looks like now versus then.
Yeah. Back then it was just a lot of questions, right? Now I think we've got it narrowed down to, I can pretty much, because we service the same types of clients, I can pretty much get them into brackets. And so the first thing we're going to do is hop on a discovery call. And that's basically just getting to know each other. I'm going to ask, what problems are you facing, right? Did you have a previous CPA? Why are you reaching out to us now, right? So what problem can we solve? Mm-hmm. And then that tells me, like, you need bookkeeping or you just need a tax return, right? So you need a bookkeeping and a tax return, or you just need a tax return. Usually it falls into one of those two buckets. 99% of the time. Yes, there are occasionally times when people come to us and they have a tax notice or something. They already have a previous problem. But most of the time it's, I need a tax return for, this current year. Excuse me.
You're good.
So that's how it starts. And from there, we have a proposal in your hands. So we say, like, okay, to solve this problem, here's what it's going to cost, right? I think clients appreciate that because we do it quick. They know right then. They can go compare with other CPAs. They can do whatever they want. They can take the price, do whatever, make their decision. And that's the big thing. Like, step one, you want to make an informed decision. So I've told you what we can do for you, and you know how much it's going to cost. Boom, right there. Provided that they agree to that, we're immediately going to send a client into onboarding, right? And once we send them to onboarding, that's usually when they transition to you. And at that point, if it's just a tax return, I'll probably keep them and I'll just do the tax return because I've got to correspond with the IRS, get back documents, get all kinds of stuff. If I transition them to you, there's a bookkeeping component, generally speaking, and you're going to set up the books and close it out. Now, what I've been most proud of this year was we were doing that, I'm going to say 2 weeks. I think that's a little bit long for how long it was taking us to close prior year books. And I'm talking about a whole year, not like, 1 month or anything. We were closing out full year's worth of books. You and our intern, Jamarian, shout out Jamarian. J-Man. You guys would take care of that, then shift it back to me to handle the tax portion of it. And you and I did a lot of corresponding with that. A lot of times it was you preparing the return, I'd review it, or I'd prepare it and review it. And so there was still some work there to be done, but that's it. Once we get done with that, we're basically contacting the client saying, hey, it's all done. Now we are looking at going forward. And so what we start doing then is the tax planning and all that, what I would call the actual fun stuff. Up to this point, it's just been, we need to get you compliant. We need to solve that problem.
That catch up feature.
100%.
Let's focus on kind of going back before we start moving forward. Because so many clients that come to us are really focused on forward, right? Of like, how can I, what am I going to own next year? Or I need to get this LLC set up or whatever. And it's like, well, we got to worry about last year first. And so there's usually that component first of get them on board and get the kind of the prior year, the catch up done per se. And then going into, okay, now we're caught up, tax returns filed, all these things. What is it like going forward? And I think that's what kind of where you're getting to is we do service clients on a monthly and quarterly basis, where a traditional firm, they might just file a tax return and then not talk to you for a year. We're like super heavily focused, as we already mentioned, on that communication piece. And so we really like to almost force a monthly meeting where we talk to a client once a month, even if it's just to say, hey, Garrett, how you doing? How's the streams going? How's content, whatever. And we hop right back off. A lot of times those conversations turn into hours, long of questions or just things that need to be brought up, even things that maybe that we need to address with the client from an accounting perspective or tax perspective. And so more of a monthly service subscription based kind of service than a one and done, so to speak. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually critical. I mean, we talk about it because we've been doing it. We know it like the back of our hand. And I think we do emphasize how important it is, but especially the quarterly meetings, when every time a client comes to us in the beginning, there's a lot of friction and pain, not because we caused it, but because they are probably not used to paying a fee to an accountant, right? So there's a cost there. There's the cost of the actual taxes themselves, which for a lot of clients who were brand new to us this year in January, February, March, April, that was rough because a lot of them owed a lot of money. And it's, when you get in the cycle of like, oh, I'll just pay it. And then like 1 year you pop off with content, right? And your tax bill goes from, oh, I owe, $10,000 to now I owe 80, 90, 100K. That's a big jump. And they don't know why. And we have to sit down and explain and walk through. And then the next thing, here's how to prevent this, right? Mm-hmm. And you may pay 100K, but now we're going to pay it in $25,000 installments throughout the year. And so when tax time comes, it's not a big surprise. We've been planning this out the entire time. And so while you still pay the same amount, again, what we're offering is peace of mind. Like, okay, there's no surprises. There's no penalties, no interest. Like we've been paying this in throughout the course of the year, and it's a consistent thing rather than a one lump sum fee, because what nobody ever does is save up the money to actually pay the taxes when they come due. Everybody, I have yet to meet somebody, like everybody's surprised by a tax bill. It could be $1,000. It could be $100,000. Everybody's like, oh man, I was not expecting to have to owe that much. It's the same conversation over and over.
Well, and I would say a large portion of what we do as well on the back end of this, working with content creators is an educational aspect. It's not so much that we're teaching them how tax works, but I think a lot of the times when these clients come to us, because they are younger, because maybe some of them have never filed a tax return before, or maybe they've put off filing a tax return for a couple of years and they need multiple years filed, they just don't know how it works. And so a lot of what we do is, okay, we're going to handle this for you, but let me explain to you kind of generally how it works. And I think that can be, to your point, super important and super, just that peace of mind aspect really of they feel comfortable because, okay, now I at least kind of know how it works. And maybe, we see different types of clients, some that they're fine with turning it fully over to us and they kind of don't really care. They just want us to handle it. And then we see the other side of like, no, teach me. I want to learn. I'm running my business and I want to actually know how it works. And so we kind of do that based on what the client wants. And I think that's been a huge part of our growth as well, is just being able to, I guess, really voice that to them and explain that to them in a way that they can understand, not necessarily talking over their head like some people may do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is, like, in a lot of relationships, we've in the past compared it to like a gym membership, right? And, with a gym membership, a lot of people pay for it, but they never go. The only problem with that is, like, if you don't go, there is literally no utility to that relationship. Compared to us, even if we don't meet monthly, or we need to meet quarterly, but even if we didn't, right, we are still maintaining the books in the background. We're still doing all this back office work, payroll, books, all these other things that they have to be done, right? You may not have to have them all done monthly, but they got to be done before you can get a tax return. And so even if, again, going back to the gym membership relation there, analogy, if you pay us and we don't talk for 6 months, you still know in the background we've been maintaining the books, we've been maintaining the payroll, all of these things. Now, I'll say I don't like when we don't talk, right? I think most CPA firms, if they're billing by the hour, they actually don't want to get on a call with you because, they're going to charge you for like 15 minutes and it's not worth their time to hop on a call for 15 minutes. And plus, once you get on the call for 15 minutes, you have every incentive to get off as soon as possible because you're being billed for the time. With us, we want to get on the call and figure out what's going on because we'd rather fix a problem now than be surprised come tax season. And now, what should have been a 2-hour project for us during busy season is taking 10 hours because...
Oh, Garrett, I lost audio. I cannot hear you.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Chat, can you hear me? It looks like it's going through. Joseph, you talk.
Can't hear you.
Your audio is coming through on my end.
Hang on 1 second, Garrett.
I love seeing our generation in fields that our generation doesn't know much about because y'all are doing a great job.
Talking. I'll just let you take it for a second. I'm gonna try to get my audio back.
Yeah. Yeah, Jake, you're right. I mean, that's 100%. Like, I mean, ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Nice. You're basically a CPA, Jake. But yeah, that's with our clients, we're just trying to give them peace of mind. We're trying to explain, here's what's going on. Here's exactly what's happening. And the problem with that is some clients don't have time for it. They are too busy to sit there and listen, and they want to just operate their business. The good news is that's exactly why we're here, right? You should be doing whatever is producing the most money and most value for you and your business, and outsourcing the back office stuff to us to let us handle it, because you getting good at that is not going to produce more money for your business, right? You might as well just eat it, because every business has to. Every business has to do this back office work. We all have to file tax returns, but you might as well just let us do it for you, because one, we're good at it, we're fast, and there's no sense in you learning how to do it, because again, that's going to take away from your business operations and what you're trying to do. Imagine.
Still working on it. Sorry, I don't know what happened. The audio's just gone. I can't hear you.
Let me text him. See. Let me text Joseph real quick. But yeah, so that's that. I mean, ultimately, we prefer to meet. We don't want it to be very much like a gym membership where you pay for it and never use it. That's never going to be the case, because in the background, we're still going to be doing our end of the work, but we do want to see you and talk with you and get to know more about your business, because that's how we connect with all of our creators, right? Any creator that I'm talking to on Twitter, if they're retweeting my stuff, they're liking my content, or I'm liking theirs, is because we're having a conversation pretty often, and I know where they're at with their business, and that's to us really exciting, because it brings another level of relatability. You good, Joseph?
I'm good. I'm back.
We're back.
I don't really know what happened. I think it was my Discord settings, so sorry about that.
No, you're good. I was just basically going deeper into the gym membership analogy, but I pretty much wrapped that up.
Sure.
So it's good timing, because we can, if you want to add to it, go ahead, or we can hop to another topic. That's up to you. But
no. Yeah, I say we hop on. I think we crossed the 30-minute mark. So if you want to move on to the next topic, we can do that. I know we kind of wanted to cover a little bit of just state of the industry in general, and we'll probably do this as part of our podcast, our weekly podcast, of just covering, maybe hot topics or stuff like that, things that we see come up often. But before, I guess, anything like super recent, why don't you just talk a little bit about the industry that you've kind of seen change from maybe like when COVID kind of happened and a lot of streams and YouTube channels took off, to like kind of now and this year and what it looks like in 23.
Yeah, when we started Game On, it was great, because like VC money was flowing. There were brand deals like crazy everywhere, all over the place. People were throwing money at content creators. It was great. Life was good. I am a little bit older, and so we know those things don't last, right? The economy is very cyclical.
Sure.
And we have the experience to know that. And so I think it caught a lot of our content creators off guard, especially very recently, when that money has effectively stopped flowing. These VC firms, they're not throwing money into it like they used to. They're just not spending. Brand deals are much harder to come by than they used to be. There are still good brand deals out there. And, there are people like Dulcetto and all these other agents doing the Lord's work out there, getting our content creators good money and stuff like that. But it's harder. And I think they would attest to that. In fact, we should have, one of them, probably Alex or somebody like that, come on and speak to that.
Definitely.
But yeah, just in general, Jake says, can't use words that the audience don't know. Podcast 101. Yeah, tell me what word I used. I don't know what word that is, but
VC. Probably.
VC. So basically firms that they're like angel investors, right? They're people with a lot of money that, you think Silicon Valley and all these tech startups and stuff like that. He said cyclical and you spelled it wrong. Cyclical, seasonal, up and down, like it goes
a cycle.
But But yeah, these angel investors, they're throwing money, and it's basically just think people or companies with a lot of money that want to just spend it to get their name or their product or their likeness out there, or they want to do it as an investment, right? They want to invest in these creators. The easiest way to look at it would be like orgs, right? Like actual content creation, gaming orgs. They got a ton of money. But if you looked at this past year, what has happened is all the money has run dry. And so these orgs have been doing mass layoffs. I mean, FaZe is a great example. FaZe just did a round, but you look at like LAG, they did a ton of layoffs earlier, which I will say this. I don't want to, get too into the weeds with it, but I think it's really embarrassing and it's really bad because, LAG did that round of layoffs right after they brought on like Iceman Isaac and a couple of other people, like big names, probably within like a 6-month time frame. It could have been about a year time frame, but they basically didn't budget enough, not nearly enough, for like 6 months of time, which is not a long time. So they were bringing on creators, and then they basically cut like their entire staff, and they just kept on the biggest names, like again, Iceman and Isaac.
Right.
And
I think what you see with that too, Garrett, is because there's such a gap with some of these firms or excuse me, orgs. They're so large that there's such a gap in that structure and that corporate structure of the people who are maybe doing the marketing and the content management or the talent management and bringing people on and offering these contracts and things to the top of the people who are actually making the decisions. And that's something that you see often in this industry of, we actually knew a creator that had signed a deal or was on deal with them and just re-signed and moved and had a whole plan. And then, not even 3 months later, I think it was, basically the org is no more. They're
with no notice.
Got rid of everyone.
They literally cut with no notice. That's crazy.
And so you see that's what you see is that gap of somebody at the top put their foot down and said, okay, this isn't happening anymore. And then even though they had just been signing people, it just doesn't really matter. And that's something I think that we can kind of attest to a little bit more, seeing the financial side of things. Not that we work with any of the huge orgs, but even just understanding the ins and outs of the financial aspect and the corporate structure that a lot of like maybe the talent or the content creators don't see. And so they're like, what the heck, man? Like, I just signed this contract, and it can be super hard on those people because they're the one that feel the consequences of it.
Bro, if you sign a contract and you set up moving and you get all that done, and literally a month later you get cut with no notice, the level of negligence the employer has to have to the financials, it has to be through the roof. I mean, that's mind blowing. That would be, imagine like we hire somebody and a month later we cut them with no notice because we can't afford them. Like, how does that happen? Like, how would you not forecast that?
I think a lot of the times too, and we'll probably have a whole podcast specifically dedicated to talking about orgs, gaming organizations and esports organizations in general. But I think a lot of it is because the people at the top really funding it, as you said, kind of don't really know the industry. And I think esports, especially esports, it took off, it's taken off in the past 10 years or so. And people are getting into it because they see the money in it maybe. And so they're funding it because they want to return. They just need somewhere to put their money, but they don't really understand how to run these orgs, or really, they don't understand the talent at all. And so that's where the disconnect happens of, they have so much going on, right? Maybe they're in the Overwatch League, they're also in the CDL, they're also in CS, and then maybe they have a whole content creator line of people as well. And I think that's where there's so much going on. They're spread so thin that even though there's a lot of capital involved, they don't really know where the return's coming from. And I think that's kind of what ends up happening inevitably to some of these that pull out. Yeah,
I mean, well, in a lot of cases, they don't pull out; they're forced out. They go broke. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to every time. Because we've talked about it a lot just personally, and I've talked with a lot of owners of orgs, and none of them make money. None of them. Like it is so hard to find an org that truly turns a profit year in and year out. Now, that's not to say like they're a bad org or anything like that. I just don't think the economics of that business model are sustainable. And it's not that I don't think it, I know it to be true, because that's why, these things are happening. That's why FaZe does this massive round of layoffs. And that's why, and it's not just FaZe, it's a lot of orgs that are doing it, but, or have done it.
You see some of these orgs, like just take like 100 Thieves, for example. 100 Thieves, I'm sure, is bringing in top line revenue, but a lot of that is coming from the clothing aspect of it and the product side that they're selling, not necessarily the gaming and the esports teams that they're funding. A lot of that is to do with salaries and just the crazy inflation that's going on in that industry. And again, we could dive into this. This is a deep hole, but I think the ones you see doing well, maybe what 100 Thieves, Optic Gaming, some of these bigger ones maybe that everybody knows about, it's because of kind of all the products that they sell and their merch and all these other things versus, actually the gaming aspect of it per se.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest example to relate back to is oftentimes FaZe now because they're public and so their financials are made public. But, with Optic and the other big orgs, at least in the CDL scene, and then, we could do this with Valorant orgs, we could do this with any org, and most of these orgs have, esports teams across various game titles. Mm-hmm. But as long as I will say we should talk about this on another podcast, absolutely, because we have a few other things to talk about. But, if you and we watched the Devin Nash video, and relating back to that, I mean, he hits the nail on the head when he says it's publisher driven. And that's why every esports team from a competitive scene is destined to fail because of that. Now, not all of them do. There are other, not every title is like Activision, right? Where, the CDL buy-in alone is 25 million. And that you ain't winning enough to make back the 25 million, even in merchandise sales. That's not going to bring in enough advertising to do that. But yeah, I mean, we should on the next one, we should just take notes and basically talk. We could talk an hour about that, but
sure.
Yeah. Was there anything else? I mean, overall general sentiment in the industry right now is the economy is down. Money's not flowing like it used to. It's not the worst we've seen it. Honestly, it's probably middle of the road, not terrible. The biggest creators are still making good money, but I think this is a point in time where a lot of smaller creators kind of bow out because they're forced to, because, people just aren't, and it trickles down, right? So just individuals alone aren't contributing as much as they used to. So, a lot of our content creators aren't getting the tips, the subs, bits on Twitch, stuff like that. They're not getting the revenue they're used to. That being said, a lot of our creators have seen a lot of success on Kick, because while, if you take the same subs they were getting from Twitch, you can reduce the amount of subs they get a lot on Kick, but because the payout is skewed the way it is on Kick now, right, you still make the equivalent amount of money or more in a lot of cases. And so, I'm not saying
I'd like to do sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I would like to do a segment probably on another podcast as well about that specifically, of just different platforms, because I know for us, we can definitely attest to the fact that a lot of our creators that do really well probably are the ones that are more easily flexible and are more easily, can kind of just go with the flow of what's working. We've seen creators that have done extremely well on Facebook back when Facebook contracts were huge. Now they've pivoted. Maybe they've moved, more off of live streaming into, short form content. And then you see Kick as well now kind of coming up. And it's the same exact thing, right? It's like who gets there first and who kind of kicks that off. And, basically
no pun intended.
Well there. Yeah, no pun intended, but does well there, kind of on the front end, and because we have creators that are doing that. So it'd be a good thing to talk about too, just from a creator standpoint. And honestly too, just for those listening, we are definitely going to have creators on the podcast. We're super excited to have guests to talk about this stuff, because we have clients that I know would love to speak to some of this and probably can give us some super good insight on their vision on it. Obviously we're looking at it from a completely different lens than they do. So but no, I mean, to move us on, Garrett, we'll have more on the state of the industry segment probably on future episodes, but talk a little bit about, just right quick before we move into the Q&A section, what from our perspective, and I know we already covered this a little bit, but from the most common things that we kind of service a client on from a financial or tax perspective, when a client comes to you, what is the number one thing that we're kind of doing on a day in, day out basis that provides tons of value for our clients?
Yeah. I mean, that comes back to like, what problems do we solve? Right. I mean, that's all we are ever after, is like, what problems can we solve? We know we'll make the money. We know we'll get after it. It's just, can we solve a problem for our client? And that's where we find, make yourself useful. Right. And the ones we probably get the most are like, I kind of took notes, so I'm looking off to the side screen here. But one problem we solve very easily and quickly is like creating a set of financials, like just a profit and loss. And for those that don't know what a profit and loss is, it's basically your income minus all of your expenses, right? Why would that be important? Well, there are so many reasons. First and foremost, it tells you how you did for the year, right? And it's not like these are financial numbers. And oftentimes, again, like the saying, the numbers don't lie, right? So you may think you had a great year, but it turns out you didn't have as good of a year as you thought you did because you spent way more than you brought in. It also helps us prepare a tax return. Like that is like the bare bones basic, what we have to be able to prepare a tax return. And finally, for financial reasons, if you want to get a mortgage or anything like that, if we have a set of financials, if we're constantly maintaining those in the background and your bank says like, hey, or you're trying to get approved for a loan or a mortgage or something like that, and you say, hey, the bank needs a set of financials up through this month. Cool. I mean, you've done it. I've done it. We've done it. I don't know how many times now where we just say like, all right, got you. And we literally send them the document like right then, because all we have to do is go to QuickBooks, print the report. We've got it to them we have to set the parameters based on their needs, but then we send it to them and it's, they forward it to their bank and they're good. Right.
Well, and I'll ask you this too. How many times have you had a client come to you, a prospective client, and they already had financial records? I mean, how many? I would say maybe 1%, 5%, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's just because so many people, they don't view their content creation business, whether it be more of a media company, as you attest to earlier, of a more of a essentially an entertainment business, a media company, or whether it be just them live streaming and all their money comes from their live stream and then any brand deals that they get on the side. They are self-employed and they are running a business, and they don't view it that way, right? They're viewing it as, no, this is just what I do. I do it for fun and I get paid to do it and I love it. And we really kind of, I think, see some of their questions more as like, okay, let's kind of reshape their mind a little bit to think about them, to think about their business as truly a business. And what does a business do? Well, the whole goal of business is to make money, right? That's what every business is about. Are you making money? And most of them can't really answer that. They know what their 1099s say for the prior year, from what Twitch paid them out, what YouTube paid them out, or what a brand paid them out, but they don't know what their expenses were, and they just have no image or picture of, am I actually cash flowing? Am I making money? Until we kind of create these financial records for them. And I think it can be very eye-opening for some clients that maybe they are 20, 21, 25 years old, and they've been doing this for a few years, but like you said, they have a pop-off year, and they look at it and they're like, man, I made $300,000 last year. Like, wow, and I think that's something that can be super helpful and eye-opening for clients that,
wait till you see the tax on that. That's right. Where we get the wow, right? But yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. That, and that goes back when I get on a call, the first thing, it's not the first thing. I oftentimes lead in, with like, tell me about yourself, tell me about your business. But one of the first questions I'm going to ask is like, how much did you make last year? Ballpark it. Like, give me rough estimate. Most of them, they like, I made 100,000, right? Or close to it. And they may pull up, if they're on Twitch or Facebook, whatever platform, they can pull it up and like see for that time period. So they have a pretty good idea from that standpoint. But when it comes to like brand deals and stuff like that, no idea. Like most of the time they're like, it could be another 10, 20, 30,000. I'm like, well, those numbers can change your taxes a lot. So,
right.
I mean, it's not like the biggest deal in the world, but
just speaking to that, like I actually had a client that I had a meeting with this week who I showed him his current year-to-date financials just for this year, and he had already made over $100,000 year-to-date this year, and comparatively speaking to his prior year, that was substantially higher. Mm-hmm. And he was shocked. He had no clue. He said, I've already made $100,000 this year, and it's so interesting because in the day in day out grind on that, he's working to get these brand deals, he's working to get to do his job essentially. And, a lot of the times you see that money hit your bank account and you just keep moving forward. But a lot of these things, and this is a good point to make as well, is these people are getting paid a lot of times 30, 45, sometimes even 90 days after the work has been completed, especially with brand deal stuff. And so they're getting paid a lot later than they actually do the work or complete the brand deal contract or complete even with YouTube, is a month behind. And so I think a lot of the times it can be super eye-opening for clients to just see, wow, I've actually done this year, and it's just helpful perspective whenever you view it as they're really running a business. And so that's one of the fun things I think for me doing it is just being able to help them and see that. Because like you said, we're creating financials straight from their bank accounts, and we're seeing every transaction that comes through. There's nothing false about it. It's all there, and they can see it. And if they have questions, we look through the data together, and it's just super cool to see that.
We had somebody that earlier this year. I mean, you probably remember exactly what I'm talking about, but they said, I probably spent like $50,000 on Uber Eats, and then we got in there and started looking at the actual data and stuff like that. And it was not even close. It was, right. I don't remember what the number was, but call it 10,000, 15,000, which, I mean, yeah, still a decent amount of money, but sure. Some people just don't grasp, like they think they overspent when it comes to deductions and stuff like that. They think they spent more than they really did, and they think they made less than they really did, right? And right. A lot of times the opposite is true. Well, if we're doing that quarterly and we can plan around this and like, here's what the actual numbers are and bring that to them, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, it's bringing somebody back down to earth. The good news is we can do it very quickly from a taking up their time, right? I'd rather them know, like, if we got bad news, like, let's get it to them quick. Let's bring them back down to earth, rein them in a little bit, get a payment in. We've assessed the situation. We fixed the problem. Now they can go back to creating content, and they have a better perspective on, like, okay, going forward, I need to, maybe make more money or make less money or not make less, but save this amount. Exactly. Like things like that. So, because the worst thing is you get to the end of the year and you're just now finding out, right? That's awful.
That goes back into just to the point of just the educational aspect of just telling these clients, look, this 1099 you're getting paid on, it is not tax withheld. There's no tax withholdings on this, and you're going to owe, could be upwards of 30% of that. And so if you're looking at that payout from YouTube of 10 grand, you didn't get 10 grand. You got 10 grand, but trust me when I say a portion of that is going to the government. So yeah. I think that can be a huge part of that as well. But to move us on a little bit, I know we wanted to keep this relatively short. I know we're coming up on an hour now. So I just wanted to close out with a few questions that we had. And in the future, going on a future podcast, we are going to be live streaming these every episode. So we hope to have more chatters in. We shout out to the chatters in here now. Shout out to Jake, who's been in.
Appreciate you, Jake.
We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
But we do hope in the future to have more guests on and have the Q&A section be, for the guests as well as for me and Garrett on anything that we have questions in the chat. But for this week, we're just going to cover some questions that we get commonly. And I'm just going to kick it off. We have 3 that we want to cover, and I'm going to let Garrett take the first one. Garrett, one super common question we get is, do I need an LLC? A client gets on a call with you, a prospect gets on a call with you, and yeah, maybe they say I need a tax return or whatever, but that question always comes up of, do I need an LLC? Do I need a whatever? And they maybe don't even know what that means. Speak to that question a little bit and whether they may need it or may not, and just kind of how you would answer that for a client that may be asking it.
Yeah. So first and foremost, an LLC, if you're just if you're a single person business, sole proprietor, an LLC is going to be disregarded from a tax standpoint. So to answer the question, do you need an LLC for tax purposes? No, you still get all the same deductions. You get everything you need, the LLC is not going to change anything. For legal purposes, yes, you may need an LLC. It's a limited liability company. That means it's going to protect you should you get sued. It's basically separating out the business assets from your personal assets so that if you get sued, they have to go after just what's inside the business and not your personal belongings. That being said, you may need an LLC for other reasons. One common one is if you want to open up like a separate business bank account, they'll ask for the articles of organization, which is basically your registration documents with the state. That is very common. So while you don't necessarily need an LLC for tax purposes, you may need one just to do other things that, again, pertain to your business. So I highly recommend getting an LLC when you start out. They're relatively cheap. They're relatively easy to set up. If you don't know how to set one up, pay an attorney. Shout out John Laster. He's great. I just want to shout him out real quick. He's the GOAT. He's done this. He could tell you, but he probably can't tell you because he's done it so many times. He probably doesn't count anymore. But just have an attorney set it up, and Yeah, you should probably do it, but I just want to specify that for tax purposes, no, you technically don't need one. So if you came to us and
Yeah,
you
and I
didn't
mean,
have one, it's not going to cost you. You're not going to lose out on a deduction because you didn't have one, basically.
right. Yeah, and ultimately, I think what your answer is going to be, it depends, which is the most common accounting response you're
It depends
get.
to everything.
But it will depend. It will depend on what the client specifically has, you know, and their situation, which we're obviously going to assess when we talk to you. So,
Yep.
yeah. Next one is what deductions can I get as a content creator, as somebody who streams all day long or maybe produces YouTube content? What deductions am I, you know, am I able to deduct on my tax return and basically reduce my income? I'll speak to this one a little bit, and Garrett, you can chime in on anything that I miss. The most common ones that you're going to see, right, is anything related to what you do as far as equipment goes, or you know, your setup, right? So if you play games all day, obviously you probably have a nice PC, you probably have some nice monitors, you probably have a desk, all your whole setup, right? Most everybody does. Me and Garrett have setups and PCs, and just like most of our creators do as well. That obviously all of that equipment, all of that, all the cables, all the things related to your setup, your camera, your lighting, microphones, all these things, right, are going to be deductions that you can get. Now, while those aren't something you may buy every single year and upgrade every year, even if you do upgrade them every single year, those are going to be write-offs for sure. Also, another thing to consider is going to be any subscriptions that you have, whether it be softwares or apps that you use for editing videos, for editing your content, for you know, in order to stream the content, you know, Stream Elements, OBS, all these different things that you're going to use. Obviously, everybody uses different stuff, but all the subscriptions related are going to be deductions for sure. Anything that you have on stream, right? So anything that's in the back of the camera, you know, my setup behind me, Garrett's setup behind him, depending on what it's for, if it's strictly for your setup and for kind of the image that you're going for, those things might be deductions that, you know, may be in question, but those things can also be deductions. And then just anything related to what you do on a day-to-day basis. You know, the general consensus from the IRS is always going to be, is it ordinary and necessary for your business? Even down to meals, right? If you are streaming and you order DoorDash and you're, you know, while you're streaming so you can eat instead of going, you know, turning off the stream, that I would say that's ordinary and necessary to your business, right? So those meals are going to be deductible for sure. And so that's kind of the bucket that we drop things into and just make sure that it kind of checks that box. But most of the time when we see creators come to us that had a prior accountant, or maybe were filing a tax return by themselves, they were not claiming all the deductions that we will kind of find for them. And usually that takes us going through, to Garrett's point earlier, and creating a set of financial statements and really seeing what all are they paying for that we may can lump into being necessary to their content creation business. Garrett, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that one as far as deductions go.
Yeah, it's section 162 in the IRS code, and I don't expect people to look that up or anything like that, but I mean it's literally exactly what you said. It's spelled out: ordinary and necessary. So if you ever have a question or anything like that, you can look up section 162. If you Google it, it'll pull straight to that. And there are a lot of examples out there as well. If you're Googling that, there are a lot of articles that talk about what's deductible and what's not. For content creators, the only thing I want to say is content creators, generally speaking, don't have a ton of deductions, right? They may have that one PC, you know, that they get once every couple of years, and you're talking about $5,000. But to a content creator that's making $300,000, that's just not a lot of money, right? I mean, at best, a lot of our creators pay editors and pay their people. Very similar to our business because we're service based. I think that's going to be the largest expense, generally speaking. But you're right. A lot of our clients coming in, they do miss a lot of what I would say smaller deductions that add up over time, over the course of a year. And by us getting those for them, they do save a little bit in taxes. But generally speaking, content creators just don't have a ton of deductions overall.
One other one I wanted to loop in just to say for our creators listening, any creators that are listening still at this point, I know we've been on for a while. Any subs that you have, Twitch subs, right? You're going to sub or even donations to another creator, and your name's popping up on their screen, they're shouting you out. that's 100% going to be marketing for your company, for your business, for your brand in general. And so any Twitch subs that you have, stuff like that, if you're going on Kick and subscribing to your local tax guy on Kick, that's gonna be a deduction for sure. So any of that stuff, it's just good to remember. And a lot of the times, even with the current clients we do have, their Discord and us hitting us up saying, hey, would this be deductible if I were to do XYZ? And we're just kind of covering it kind of as it comes. So any questions like that, we get all the time. So
I do want to throw in the one caveat really quick is this is assuming you're running a business, like your content creation is a business. If it's a hobby, hobbies don't get to deduct anything, right? The only difference is with a hobby income, you don't have to pay self-employment tax on hobby income. But you don't get to deduct expenses. So if it's a hobby, and again, I'm not trying to plug ourselves, but that's a perfect example of why you would come to us is to, we need to determine whether or not this is a hobby or a true business and you're self-employed. But I just want to throw that in there. We're talking about deductions and stuff like that, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, you only get these deductions if you're operating an actual business. If it's just a hobby on the side, you can't deduct these, right?
So if you're like me and you live stream once a week while you're playing Apex Legends, and you probably shouldn't deduct your 1099 for $30 and claim that on your return. So
Jake says, Jake said, what defines the difference in a hobby or a business? There are several factors, Jake. That's a good question. And I'll be quick here because I know we're running short on time. Good. But that is a great question. And there's actually, if you were to Google that, the IRS on their website, they have a publication dedicated to just that. And so one example, there are like 8 of them, but not an example, but one test, so to speak, is do you need the income? Like, do you live off this income? Because if you live off of it, it's probably a business. But if you don't need it, it's just incidental to what you're doing. It's kind of like a lot of people get this with like horses, right? They buy horses and stuff like that. Most of that's a hobby, right? They're not like they're not in the business of racing horses and all that
income, but it's not because they needed to live off of.
Right. They may do like training courses and stuff like that on the side, but you're talking like it's a couple $1,000s maybe. And it's just, they don't do it for that purpose of running a business. They just do it because, they're basically trying to recoup some of their costs from owning a horse because it's expensive. And that's just one example, but that's the IRS. If you Google it, it's usually like the first link. You can look at the various requirements for a business versus a hobby. Jake says, so if I quit my job, it would become a business. I mean, again, it's whether or not you need that income to live. So if I know for a fact your wife works, right? And if she makes enough for both of y'all to live off of comfortably, it doesn't even have to be comfortably, just enough to sustain you guys. It still may be a hobby, right? I don't know. That's the thing.
Jake, you're not good enough to quit your job and stream.
Dang.
I'm just kidding.
Dang. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding, bro.
I'll sub. You do it, Jake. I'll sub to you. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, and obviously, like, I mean, if somebody, it's not so much she's a teacher, she makes no money. Yeah, well, that's fair. But it's not always about the money itself. Like somebody may make $20,000. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a business. It could be $100,000. But if somebody makes $1 million a year and they just accidentally made $100K on the side and it had nothing, they were not trying to. It was just incidental to what they were doing. It may be a hobby, but I don't know. Again, we would have, every situation is different. We have to look at the facts.
Most of the time when we see that consideration, it's coming along with a client who does have a full-time job and they do create content on the side, and maybe they have not broken the threshold of income that really warrants, okay, this is, basically 50% of my income versus my regular job, and I'm thinking about maybe switching over to do this full-time or whatever. Usually that's where the consideration happens. And that would be a situation where we would sit down and look at it with them and say, okay, does it make more sense tax-wise to claim this as a hobby because that's really what it is, and we're not going to take deductions? Or is this a secondary business for you and you depend on this income and we're going to take deductions against it? So it's going to be client specific for sure.
Yeah.
Last question. I want to move us along because I know we've been on quite a while. We're going to try to keep these around an hour. Garrett, what does it look like when a client comes to you? I know this has happened before and it happens quite often, that says, okay, I need a tax return. And so you're talking to them about, okay, last year's tax return, and you maybe say, okay, well, could you give me your tax return for 2021? Because right now we're going to be filing a tax return for 2022. And so you ask them for that, and they say, well, I actually didn't file in 21. And then maybe they say, well, I actually didn't file in 2020 either. And so they have multiple years past due tax returns that they just did not file, and they're freaking out, right? And then that's why they actually hit you up, was to say, look, I've been making money from Twitch for 3 or 4 years now. Here's the general ballpark, and I haven't filed a tax return on any of it. I'm freaking out. Is the IRS going to come after me? What do I need to do? How are you answering that question? How are you going about that?
Yeah, straight to jail. No, no, that's that's a good question. So, this depends. This is really simple. So it's kind of like a branching path. I'm going to ask one question that determines where we go from here. So the first question is, what documents can you provide me? Can you get me the prior year documents, like the actual source documents? So let's say it's a W-2. And if they can't do that, then the first thing I'm going to do is get a power of attorney, form 2848, and get a transcript from the IRS. And basically that's just all the information the IRS has on you, like W-2s that have been filed with them. Because when your employer gives you a W-2, they also are required to provide a copy to the IRS. IRS puts it in their system so that when you file a tax return, they can match it up. And they can say like, okay, we had this W-2 on file. Does your tax return match that? Well, we can request those transcripts. And so if you can't provide me any documentation, the first thing I'm going to do is request transcripts. After that, that'll kind of guide the next set of questions I have. Is like, okay, it looks like you had a W-2 for this employer and you had maybe a 1099 from Twitch, call it, right? And so if I see the 1099 from Twitch, first thing, I'm going to say is like, this is how much income the IRS is saying Twitch has for you. This is what they reported. Let's go back and see if we can find some expenses. And that may be looking at bank statements. It may be looking at all kinds of different things. It depends. But it's really that simple. I know I just said a lot, but basically, can you provide me information? Okay, you can't. All right, let's get a transcript. I'm going to have to call the IRS, wait on hold a little bit. But once we get that transcript, we'll go from there. And then once we have, the transcript, any other information that we ask for, we put the returns together and file them. At that point, if you owe tax, you'll probably have some penalties and interest, right? But the good news is you're not going to jail. That's not how it works. It's not that scary of a situation. You do need to file. You need to do it, quickly. You need to pay quickly and go ahead and get this behind you, because you're probably going to be on the receiving end of a lot of letters and notices and all that stuff. And that's not fun for anybody. But we can put the situation to bed relatively quickly. If we can get that transcript, get the documents from you, and, we can take what has built up to be years of festering tax returns that have caused you so much stress and pain and anxiety and all that stuff. We can have that done within a couple of weeks and have those filed. Now you're still going to owe money, and that sucks, but we can at least, kind of cover the wound there and stop the bleeding, right? We can put a Band-Aid on it and at least kind of mend some of that. And then going forward, we can do all the planning and all those things to make sure that we don't end up in that situation again. That's the overall goal, is let's make sure we don't, let's not let this happen again.
So ultimately, it's going to be a situation of, let's get the back tax returns done first before we worry about current year. And then, let's assess those situations. And, there is going to be times where there's money owed for each year because of, the actual tax plus the penalties and interest. There is payment plan situations, and obviously all those things would be assessed client to client. But that would be a situation where we would just, okay, let's get the back tax returns done first, then we'll move forward. And again, the IRS isn't sending you to jail. They're not coming after you. They're going to get their money, and that's what they're worried about. And while penalties and interest are scary, ultimately that's what it's going to be. Is you're going to have to pay a little bit of money for not filing, but that's kind of all it is. And so I think we've been able to ease a lot of people's mind when that situation does come up, because we've just been able to handle it. And honestly, it is a common thing that we see. We've had multiple clients just sign with us this year alone that we had to file multiple years for. And then we're still dealing with that with a few current clients that we're still trying to get transcripts for prior years. So it's just a common thing we see come up. And, if it is you out there that maybe that's your situation, you're kind of freaking out, it might be something we could help with. So, Garrett, you have any closing thoughts? I know we've been going on a while, and we wanted to keep this as short as we could, but
we hit an hour.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, we hit an hour. We got good content out there. Hopefully if anybody else is watching, you can find this on YouTube. We'll upload it later on, maybe later on today. It'll be the raw uncut version. We'll probably clip it down a little bit for some of the main topics. So look for that on Twitter or whatever. But the only thing I want to say as it pertains to this specific podcast is, Jake, I saw your question about Scump. We'll answer that on another one. We have another call we got to get to, but that is a good question. Going back to business and hobby and all that, but very good question. We'll knock that out. I'll make a note here so that we can answer it on the next one, which again will be Thursday this time next week.
And I'll say too, as far as the questions go, what we'll probably do is, and this is for all you guys listening still, is follow at your local tax guy on Twitter. Garrett's going to be able to probably be tweeting out some stuff with regards to Q&As and maybe get some questions there. So anything that you have there, hit him up on respond to those tweets that he has for Q&A questions, and or if you ever have anything like that, DM it, and then we're just going to cover common stuff or anything that people put in the chat. So we'll be looking out for common questions and answering them in the episodes to come.
Yeah, Jake, the podcast will be on YouTube, and you haven't filed since 2019, so let's hop on that. It's a shame when the guy you play with literally every night is a CPA and could handle that for you, but yeah, you just you let me know when you want to resolve that problem, if assuming you do. But yeah, outside of that, dude, I really appreciate the people who have come through, tuned in. We appreciate y'all. We'll cut this one here, and we'll be back this time next week.
We'll see you guys on the next one.
Dope. Peace.